who have crossed miles, thousands of miles, hundreds of miles to witness the historic election here in Bangladesh that is going to be held tomorrow. Thank you for coming to Bangladesh. Election is actually a festivity in Bangladesh. You may have noticed that people of this very densely populated city is not complaining about traffic jam anymore since yesterday. Because most of the people have left Dhaka, and they have left Dhaka because they are very serious about casting their vote in favor of the individual they prefer. The government has done everything to make sure that all fears are dispelled and the atmosphere is vibrant and festive. The government has declared holidays to ensure that people can go to their desired destination to cast their vote. The Election Commission and the law enforcement agencies are taking care of the security concerns. I think it's important from the government to say a few words as to why this election is more important and different from the usual elections that we have. See, it was since 2008 that the people of Bangladesh have actually not voted in an election that is free and fair. I myself did cast my vote last time in 2008, which means that there is a whole generation that has not casted their vote in the last 16, 17 years. There are people who are 40 years old but haven't managed to give a vote in their lifetime. We had parliamentary elections, at least 3 parliamentary elections that were extremely manipulative. So in one election, the parliament was formed with 153 uncontested member of parliaments. In the next parliamentary election, ballots were stuffed on the previous night. In the last election that was held in 2024, it was an election called a dummy election. Means the party in power was largely boycotted by the other political parties, but then they themselves created dummy candidates to contest. So we had all sorts of elections in our life. Back in 1990, when we had another autocratic ruler, military ruler, I was a student then, and we came down to the street to get rid of that military ruler, and the street fight resulted in a system called caretaker government, which means that after the regular tenure of a government is over, that government will step down. All the parties together will form a caretaker government with non-partisan people, and that caretaker government will be there for few months, 3 months. The only task of that caretaker government will be to conduct the election. So under a neutral, non-partisan caretaker government, election would be held. So that way we had 1991 election, we had 1996 election, we had 2001 election, and we had 2008 election. But after that, the last regime amended the constitution, scrapped the provision of caretaker government, and made sure that elections are held under partisan government so that they can have uncontested parliament, they can have parliament that will be elected on the basis of forged votes, and they can have election that would be termed as dummy election. The last 16 years we were under not an autocratic ruler but a fascist regime. All sorts of voting rights were denied. Even in professional bodies, the voting systems were tampered with. The national elections were all pre-designed in a way that the party in power would win. Now that we have, and even in all local government elections, now we have an interim government. This is the result of at least 850 lives being sacrificed, 450 people becoming blind, and at least 15,000 people getting injured. There was a revolution here in Bangladesh, and we call it July Revolution. And it was led by the students who started their process against a reservation system in the government service. But even that opposition could not be tolerated by the regime, and they used all forces to kill the movement. So that anti-reservation movement turned out to be a mass people's revolution that led to the fall of the autocratic regime. And this government, the interim government, was in the steering for 1.5 years. We tried to do three major things. One, to ensure justice for the victims of not only the July Revolution, but all those victims who were picked up, who were subjected to enforced disappearance, could never make a comeback to their families, who were brutally tortured. So it was, first call was for justice, the another call was for reform, that we don't really want to go back to a system where one regime can dictate everything. If we really want a transition towards democracy, we have to bring in certain changes in the constitution, in the administration, in the legal arena. So our second agenda was reform, and the third agenda was to hand over our responsibility to an elected government that will be elected through a free, fair and transparent election. And it is that transparency that has brought you all in to this country, where, as I started and said, that election is taken as a festival here in Bangladesh. So you all will be witnessing a very festive election that we believe will be participated by voters of all ages. Election in Bangladesh is festive. The transition to democracy should be festive because of so much of sacrifices that the people of this country have made. So while it is festive, it will also be very competitive. So it can go a little contentious in some areas, but the Election Commission, as it has explained, and the law enforcement agencies are in full control of the situation. So we believe that we will have an election where people will vote not only to say who they want to see in the realm, but also to say what they think about the reform proposals that have been put forward. So there will be 2 ballot papers. In the pink ballot paper, they will be voting in the referendum to say yes or no to the reform proposals. In the white ballot paper, they'll be choosing their leaders. I think the election will be very credible, with presence of so many foreign observers, and there are some very distinguished head of delegations also, and there is also a very big group of foreign journalists. We wholeheartedly welcome you. So I think you have got the numbers from the Election Commission already. I just wanted to welcome you all to our country and make sure that you all witness a very historic election that will lead to a transition to democracy, at the same time a transition in the governance. So it's been framed by the government based on what the political parties have agreed upon. So So the questions relate to whether people really want a return of the caretaker government, whether they want a balance in the power of the Prime Minister and the President, whether they want a two-tier parliament, whether they want increased participation of women in the political sphere, whether they want an expansion of their fundamental rights, whether they want participation of opposition parties in all major political decision making, in all institutional reform. So these are the broad questions that have been put under 4 questions in the pink ballot, and there is also one question that says that if you say yes, do you want the political party that wins the election to also do the reforms in the other sectors that they have promised in the July Charter but that are not reflected in the pink paper. So this is not something the government has invented. The questions have not been invented. The questions have been framed by the government, because there could be as many as 78 questions, but you don't really give 78 questions in a referendum for people to answer. So we clustered them under 4 broad questions, with a general question that if the party that wins should do the reforms in the other sectors to which they have committed to in the entire political dialogue process. So it's not imposition of our views on the political parties. So if one political party wins and eventually yes wins, that political party is expected to do all the reforms that are not mentioned in the pink paper but that are already there in the July Charter. As to how things get implemented, there was also very lengthy discussion in the entire political dialogue process that continued for 9 months, and that was actually shown publicly. There was direct broadcast of those dialogue. There are multiple ways that one can do it. So the party elected may or will have to probably work as a regular parliament as well as a constituent parliament that will be getting the reforms done through constitutional amendment, through legislative amendment. So the question of how is also there in the July Charter, but there are 2-3 ways of doing that.